They laughed when she walked into the room. Torn sandals, trembling hands, a girl who owned nothing but her scars. No one could have imagined that the same broken soul would one day ignite a fire strong enough to change 1,000 lives. She wasn't born a hero, nor did she wear a crown. She was ordinary, invisible, almost forgotten. Until one moment, one decision, shattered her chains and turned her pain into a weapon of hope. This is the story of how she did it. New Jersey, late autumn. The kind of evening where the air feels crisp, yet the house on Maplewood Drive glows like a lantern in the dark. Fairy lights framed the porch. Cars filled the driveway. From the street, anyone passing by could hear the sound of laughter spilling out, as though the walls could barely contain the joy inside. The camera moves slowly through the front door, into a house alive with warmth. Children dart across the living room, chasing each other with soda cans in hand. A football game murmurs on the TV in the background, ignored. The smell of roasted turkey and baked macaroni drifts from the kitchen, where aunts fuss over the dishes, their voices mixing in a chorus of chatter. It was one of those evenings that looked ordinary on the surface, but felt like it mattered. And in the middle of it all sat Emily Carter. Not the wealthiest, not the most glamorous, but somehow the quiet center of the room. People leaned toward her without realizing it. Her smile had that effect. It softened edges, disarmed tempers, made others feel like they mattered. She laughed at a cousin's joke, her hazel eyes catching the light. It was the kind of laugh that belonged to someone who had learned to carry both joy and pain, but chose joy anyway. On that night, if you looked at Emily, you would think she had never known hardship. But every smile she wore was built over scars no one else could see. In the corner, Linda Carter, Emily's mother, sat quietly, taking it all in. Her white cardigan hung loosely over her shoulders, silver hair tucked behind her ears. Her eyes, though tired, carried a glow of pride. Life had not been kind to Linda. A husband lost too young. Bills that never seemed to end. Nights where loneliness sat heavier than the dark. But tonight, watching her daughter laugh and move among family, she felt, for the first time in a long time, that maybe everything had been worth it. The living room buzzed. Uncles retold hunting stories, exaggerating each detail. Aunts debated over whose recipe was better. Cousins teased one another like old times. The warmth was undeniable, but not everyone felt it. Across the room, on the arm of a leather sofa, sat Jessica Miller, Emily's cousin. Jessica was the kind of woman who never went unnoticed. Her black dress shimmered under the warm lights. A diamond bracelet glinted on her wrist with every movement. Her smile was perfect, practiced, but her eyes betrayed something else. The camera lingers. She stirs her drink slowly, ice clinking against the glass, her gaze fixed on Emily. Where there is love, envy often lingers close behind. And for Jessica, that envy had already begun to take root. She leaned toward her aunt and whispered, just low enough not to carry across the room. Strange, isn't it? How everyone gravitates toward Emily, as if she's the center of everything. The aunt chuckled, brushing it off. She just has a kind heart, Jessica. People feel safe with her. Jessica's lips pressed into a thin smile. Her eyes, however, stayed locked on Emily. Meanwhile, Emily moved gracefully around the room. She carried plates from the kitchen, set them in front of her uncles, her aunts, her cousins. She made sure the children had enough to eat before she even thought of herself. Each gesture was small, but each one left its mark. When she bent down to hand a plate to her grandmother, the old woman patted her hand with affection. "You're too good, Emily. Always taking care of everyone." Emily smiled, her cheeks warming. "It's nothing, Grandma." But across the room, Jessica's jaw tightened. She sipped her drink slowly, as if swallowing something bitter. Voiceover, whispering tone. And so the night went on, laughter echoing, love spilling from every corner of the room. While in the shadows of Jessica's heart, something darker was quietly growing. The camera pulls back slowly, catching the whole scene. The golden lights, the laughter, the plates clinking. Emily's smile shining at the center of it all, and Jessica's eyes fixed on her, unblinking. The picture was perfect, almost too perfect, and perfect pictures always crack. Every family has its patterns. The same stories retold, the same roles played, as though some invisible script has already been written. The Carter family gathering was no different. Dinner moved to the long oak dining table, set with polished silverware and glasses that sparkled under the chandelier. Conversation rose and fell like waves. Laughter spilled out at one end. Hushed whispers stirred at the other. Emily sat near the middle, the bridge between generations. To her left, her younger cousins, noisy, restless, spilling cranberry sauce on their shirts. To her right, her elders, discussing politics, bills, and the never-ending complaints about the economy. Emily listened to both, smiling, offering a nod here, a gentle word there. It wasn't just conversation. It was connection. She had this way of making everyone feel important. Like even the smallest voice mattered. Linda Carter watched her daughter with quiet admiration. She remembered when Emily was little, how she would break up fights between kids on the playground, how she always noticed the one child sitting alone, how she carried responsibility even when she was far too young. That same trait had only grown. The meal went on. Plates passed. Glasses refilled. And then came the inevitable family tradition. Teasing. "Emily," one uncle said loudly, grinning as he raised his fork. "If you'd been born a son, you'd be carrying this whole family on your shoulders by now." The table erupted in laughter. Few clapped. Even Emily laughed, though her cheeks flushed pink. Everyone laughed. Everyone except Jessica. Her smile froze, her fingers tightening around the stem of her glass. It was just a joke. A harmless line thrown into the air. But to Jessica, it was another reminder. Another shadow cast over her. Jessica had always been the one people admired. The one people praised for her style, her success, her perfect photographs on social media. But in moments like this, it was Emily, quiet, selfless Emily, who became the center. The knife scraped against Jessica's plate as she cut into her turkey. The sound, sharp and grating, cut through the laughter for just a moment. Emily, oblivious, leaned over to refill her grandmother's glass of water. She didn't notice Jessica's stare. Dinner ended with the usual mess. Children sneaking cookies, adults pushing their chairs back, someone starting a debate about football in the living room. Emily helped clear the table, stacking plates, carrying them carefully into the kitchen. Jessica followed, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. In the kitchen, Emily rolled up her sleeves and rinsed dishes. Steam rose from the sink. She looked up with a smile when Jessica entered. "Want to help me?" she asked. Jessica paused, her expression unreadable. "Sure," she said finally, setting her glass on the counter. For a while they worked side by side. Plates clinked. Water rushed. The only sound between them was the scrape of cutlery. Then Jessica spoke. "You're really good at this, you know. Playing the perfect daughter. The perfect cousin." Emily glanced at her, caught off guard. "I'm not perfect, Jess. I'm just helping out." Jessica's lips curled, but it wasn't a smile. "Right. Just helping out." The air between them thickened. Emily dried her hands on a towel, her voice quiet. "You don't have to compare yourself to me. You've achieved so much. You know that." Jessica's eyes narrowed, sharp as glass. "Don't pity me, Emily." Silence stretched. Only the hum of the refrigerator filled the space. Then Jessica picked up her glass and walked out, leaving Emily staring at the sink, unsettled. Sometimes betrayal doesn't announce itself with a scream. It begins with a whisper, with silence, with the sound of glass against wood as someone walks away. Back in the living room, the party carried on. Someone turned on music. Children danced. Linda laughed with her sisters, relieved to feel joy again after so long. But upstairs, Jessica stood at the window of the guest room, staring out at the quiet street below. The fairy lights on the porch flickered faintly. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass. Flawless, polished, admired. And yet, invisible. Her voice was barely a whisper. "It's always Emily." The camera pulls back slowly, leaving Jessica framed in the window, the glow of the family behind her, the darkness of the street ahead. The cracks were small, almost invisible, but they had begun. The night stretched on, the kind of night families remember years later, wrapped in nostalgia. But memory is tricky. It remembers laughter, yes. And it also remembers the silence between the laughter. The Carter home was alive with energy. In the living room, an old record player spun holiday tunes. Cousins lounged on the couch, half asleep with too much food. Children played hide and seek upstairs, their giggles echoing down the hallway. And there, in the heart of it all, was Emily Carter. She sat cross-legged on the floor with two of her younger cousins, helping them with a puzzle. She wasn't showing off, she wasn't trying, it was just who she was. Every piece she placed came with a gentle word of encouragement, every small victory met with a cheer. Some people shine without trying, not because they want the spotlight, but because their light can't help but spill into the room. Her grandmother watched from the recliner, her wrinkled hands folded neatly. A tender smile played on her lips. "Emily," she said warmly, "you remind me so much of your grandfather. Always patient, always giving." Emily's cheeks flushed pink. She glanced toward her mother, Linda, who nodded proudly. But across the room, Jessica Miller sat stiffly on the arm of a chair, her phone in hand, scrolling. The glow of the screen lit her face, but her eyes weren't really on it. They flickered up again and again toward Emily. Her jaw clenched each time someone praised her cousin. Her uncle's booming laugh filled the space. "If Emily ever ran for mayor of this town, I swear she'd win in a landslide." More laughter, more nods of agreement. Emily shook her head shyly. "I don't think politics is my calling." "Exactly my point," another cousin added. "That's why people would trust you." Jessica set her phone down, her smile thin, her voice cutting into the moment. "Or maybe people just like what they can't have. Emily looks perfect because no one knows what's underneath." The room quieted. Emily blinked, surprised. "Jessica," she began gently. But Jessica waved a hand, forcing a laugh. "Relax. I'm joking." The conversation shifted. The music grew louder. But the air carried a faint tension, like smoke no one wanted to acknowledge. Later, when most of the children had gone to bed and the adults settled into smaller circles of conversation, Emily slipped into the kitchen to prepare coffee. The house felt quieter, softer. She measured grounds into the machine, the simple rhythm calming. For a moment she was alone. Then Jessica entered. Her heels clicked softly against the tile floor. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching Emily. "You really enjoy this, don't you?" she said suddenly. Emily glanced up. "Enjoy what?" "Being the good one. The helper. The one everyone runs to." Emily hesitated, unsure how to respond. "I just like making people happy. That's all." Jessica tilted her head, her eyes narrowing. "And what do you get out of it?" Emily blinked. "I don't think of it that way." Jessica smiled, but it wasn't kind. "Of course not." The silence stretched. Emily busied herself with pouring hot water, adding cream and sugar the way she knew her relatives liked. She tried to shake the unease creeping into her chest. But Jessica didn't move. She just stood there, studying her cousin as though seeing her for the first time. Or perhaps seeing something she'd always refused to acknowledge. Sometimes envy wears a smile. Sometimes it hides behind polite words. But it always lingers, waiting for a moment to strike. The sound of laughter from the living room drifted in, muffled by the walls. It felt distant now, separate from the charged quiet between the two women. Finally, Jessica pushed off the counter. "Well, don't stay up too late playing Saint Emily." Her heels clicked as she walked out, leaving the faint scent of her perfume hanging in the air. Emily exhaled slowly, steadying herself. Her reflection in the dark window above the sink looked almost like a stranger. The smile she'd worn all evening had slipped, and in its place was something more fragile. She whispered under her breath, as if to convince herself. It's fine. She's just tired. It's nothing. But deep down, it didn't feel like nothing. The coffee was ready. Emily carried the mugs into the living room, placing each one carefully in front of her relatives. Smiles greeted her. Gratitude, warmth. And from across the room, Jessica's eyes followed her every move. The camera lingers on that gaze. Sharp, unblinking, heavy with something unspoken. The bonds of family seemed unbreakable. But sometimes the fracture starts where no one is looking. Every family gathering has its golden hour. That moment when the laughter is loudest, the room feels closest, and everyone believes the night will stay perfect forever. But perfection never lasts. The Carter home glowed like a postcard. The kids were finally tucked into spare rooms upstairs, their giggles fading into sleep. The adults lingered in the living room, coffee mugs warm in their hands, conversations softening into stories and secrets. Emily sat near the fireplace, her knees tucked under a blanket. Her cheeks still flushed from laughter, her voice gentle as she asked her grandmother about the old family farm in Vermont. The old woman's eyes sparkled as she described summers long gone, fields stretching wide, the smell of fresh hay. Everyone leaned in, listening. Even the room itself seemed to hush around the memory. It was in her nature to pull people closer, to make their past feel alive, to make their present feel enough. Emily's mother, Linda, looked at her daughter with quiet pride. She remembered being young, awkward, unsure of herself. Emily was different. Graceful, grounded, magnetic without trying. But across the room, Jessica Miller sat curled into an armchair, her hands wrapped around a glass of wine she had barely touched. Her smile was polite, her laugh mistimed. She watched Emily, watched the way her grandmother lit up when speaking to her, watched the way uncles and aunts leaned toward her, as though she were the anchor of the entire family. Jessica's thoughts were heavy, sharp, unspoken. It's always her. Always Emily. The fire crackled. Someone suggested bringing out dessert. Plates clinked. The golden hour rolled on. When dessert came, pumpkin pie still warm, whipped cream piled high. Emily was the one who carried the plates into the living room. She served her elders first, smiling as she set each dish carefully down. "Thank you, sweetheart," her grandmother said warmly. Jessica's jaw tightened. She picked up her fork and stabbed the pie a little too hard, the tines scraping against porcelain. Emily noticed, tilting her head slightly. "Jess, are you okay?" Jessica looked up, her expression bright but her eyes cold. "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" Emily hesitated, but before she could answer, another cousin cracked a joke that pulled the attention back to the group. The moment passed, almost unnoticed. Almost. Sometimes the smallest moments, the ones brushed aside, the ones forgotten by everyone else, are the very moments where betrayal begins. Hours slipped by. The gathering thinned as some relatives headed home, coats pulled tight against the night air. Farewells echoed at the door. But Jessica stayed. She stood at the window again, looking out at the quiet street, her reflection ghost-like against the glass. The fairy lights on the porch flickered faintly. She sipped her wine slowly, her gaze distant. Behind her, Emily approached softly. "You've been quiet tonight," she said, her voice gentle. Jessica didn't turn. "I guess I just don't have much to say." Emily stepped closer. "You don't need to compare yourself to anyone, Jess. Least of all me. You know you're loved." Jessica's laugh was sharp, bitter. "Loved? Until you walk into the room. Then suddenly I'm invisible." Emily froze, her words caught in her throat. "That's not true." Jessica finally turned, her eyes glinting in the firelight. "Isn't it? Look around, Emily. Every smile, every compliment, every ounce of attention. It always belongs to you." Emily shook her head, reaching out. "Jess, I've never tried to take anything from you." Jessica stepped back out of reach. "You don't have to try. It just happens." The tension hung heavy, unbroken until Linda's voice called from the kitchen. "Emily, could you help me with the leftovers?" Emily exhaled, forcing a small smile. "I'll be right there." She turned back to Jessica. "We'll talk later, okay?" Jessica's smile returned, but it was the kind of smile that didn't touch her eyes. Emily walked away, leaving Jessica alone at the window. The firelight flickered. The house seemed quieter now, as though it sensed something no one dared to name. Bonds of family feel eternal, unbreakable. But even steel rusts when resentment eats away at it. And Jessica's envy was already corroding everything it touched. The camera pulls back, capturing Emily laughing again in the kitchen with her mother, while Jessica stands in the shadows, staring, silent, burning. Something was coming. Everyone felt safe. Everyone felt whole. But perfection never lasts. Every story has a moment, a line you can look back on and say, "This is where everything began to change." The Carter gathering was winding down. The living room, once bursting with chatter, was now quieter. Plates stacked, coffee mugs half empty, laughter softened into tired smiles. The golden glow of the lamps made the space feel warm, safe, untouched by the outside world. Emily Carter stood near the kitchen island, packing leftovers into containers beside her mother. Linda hummed softly, her movements slow but steady. Emily teased her gently. "Mom, you don't have to do everything tonight. You should sit." Linda chuckled. "And let you run this whole house by yourself? Not a chance." Emily laughed, shaking her head. She looked content, as though this moment, this family, was all she needed. But across the room, Jessica Miller lingered in silence. She sat on the edge of the sofa, her glass of wine still half full, her gaze fixed on Emily. Every smile, every gesture, every word from her cousin felt like salt pressed into a wound she could no longer ignore. The fire in the hearth crackled, shadows shifting across her face. On the surface, the picture was perfect. But beneath perfection, something darker always waits. A cousin pulled out a guitar, strumming a soft tune. Voices joined in half-heartedly. Emily's laugh rose above them, sweet, unforced. Jessica's hand tightened around her glass until her knuckles paled. The song ended. Applause rippled. And then, as if the universe itself wanted to test the fragile balance of the night, Emily's uncle spoke. "You know, Jess," he said, looking toward her with a grin, "you should take notes from Emily. Always so thoughtful, always so generous. You two are alike. But she just has that extra sparkle." The room chuckled. Heads nodded. Jessica froze. Her smile was razor-thin, her voice syrupy as she answered, "Yes, Emily does have a way of outshining everyone." The words slid under the laughter like a knife no one noticed. Emily's brow furrowed slightly, but she kept her smile in place. "Jessica," she began softly. Jessica stood abruptly, the sudden motion startling enough to hush the room. She set her glass down with a sharp clink. "I think I'll get some air," she said coolly. No one argued. The conversation stumbled back to life as she left, but the warmth felt slightly fractured now. Outside, Jessica stepped onto the porch. The night was cold, the air sharp in her lungs. She wrapped her arms around herself, staring at the quiet street lined with dark houses. The fairy lights flickered faintly above her, buzzing. She whispered to the dark, her words almost lost in the wind. "It's always her. Always Emily." Her reflection stared back at her faintly in the window. Flawless, polished, but empty. Inside, Emily moved to the doorway, pausing when she saw her cousin standing there alone. For a moment, she considered stepping out, placing a hand on Jessica's shoulder, saying something to ease the tension. But something stopped her. Jessica turned suddenly, catching Emily's gaze through the glass. Their eyes locked. Neither spoke. Neither moved. The silence between them was louder than anything else that night. That was the moment. The quiet pause between smiles. The silence heavy enough to split the air. A look held too long. A smile held too tight. A seed planted deep enough to grow into something unstoppable. Emily turned away first, retreating back into the warmth of the house. Jessica remained outside, her face unreadable in the dim light. The camera pulls back slowly, the glowing house shrinking in the frame, laughter faint behind its walls, Jessica's silhouette still at the porch. The bonds of family seemed unbreakable. But something was about to break. The betrayal is revealed. The morning after the Carter family gathering felt deceptively ordinary. Sunlight stretched across the neat lawns of suburban New Jersey. The air smelled of coffee and damp leaves. Children rode bikes down the street, their laughter free of yesterday's shadows. But inside Emily Carter's world, something had shifted. She sat at her desk in the small office where she worked as a paralegal, organizing files, her mind drifting back to Jessica's strange silence. That look on the porch, cold, unreadable, wouldn't leave her. Her phone buzzed. A notification. An email. Subject line. Thought you should know. Emily frowned, clicking it open. The words were simple, almost cruel in their bluntness. Ask Jessica about your fiancé. Ask her why she was seen with him last Friday night, holding hands like they had nothing to hide. Emily's heart stopped. The room seemed to tilt. She read it again and again. No name, no sender trace. Just those words. Her first instinct was denial. No, not Michael. Not Jessica. Not them. Her hands trembled as she closed her laptop, forcing herself to breathe. But the seed had been planted. By evening, the truth clawed its way out. Emily arrived at Michael's apartment unannounced. The key turned easily, too easily, and when she pushed open the door, the sound hit her first. Laughter. A woman's laughter. Jessica's laughter. Emily froze in the doorway. Michael and Jessica were at the table, wine glasses in hand, their bodies leaning too close. Their faces lit with an intimacy that went beyond family bonds. Michael's expression collapsed when he saw her. Jessica didn't flinch. The room fell into silence. Emily, Michael started, his voice low, panicked. This isn't. Emily's voice cracked, her whisper sharper than a scream. Don't you dare lie to me. Jessica set her glass down slowly, meeting Emily's gaze with a calmness that felt rehearsed. You weren't supposed to find out like this. Emily's knees weakened. The walls seemed to close in, her chest tight as betrayal cut through her like a blade. Michael stood, reaching out. It was a mistake, Em. It didn't mean. Emily stepped back, her hands shaking. A mistake. My cousin. My blood. Her voice broke. How long? Jessica's lips curled into something between a smirk and a confession. Long enough. The words shattered her. Emily's breath came ragged, her vision blurring with tears. The man she trusted, the cousin she loved, both cutting into her in one cruel strike. Some betrayals don't just break the heart. They break the ground beneath your feet, until you can't tell if you're standing or falling. Emily staggered back, clutching the doorframe. Her whole world, the warm gatherings, the laughter, the golden glow of family, crumbled in that instant. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She only whispered, barely audible, I will never forgive you. Then she walked out. The door slammed. Michael called after her. Jessica's voice followed, cold, final. You'll get over it, Emily. You always do. But Emily knew. She wouldn't get over it. Something inside her had changed. Something dark had awakened. Shock, pain, denial spreads. The night Emily left Michael's apartment, the city felt different. The lights seemed too bright, the air too sharp, every sound amplified in her ears. She walked without direction, her heels clattering against the pavement, heart pounding like a drum that wouldn't stop. Her phone buzzed again. This time she ignored it. She couldn't bear to see his name on the screen. Instead, she found herself back at her mother's house, the one place she still believed was safe. Linda Carter opened the door and froze at the sight of her daughter's tear-streaked face. Emily, she whispered, pulling her into a hug. What happened? Emily's body shook as the truth tore its way out. Words she never thought she'd say, words that cut her even as she spoke them. Mom, Michael and Jessica. Linda's arms tightened around her. No, it's true, Emily sobbed. I saw them. Together. For a long moment, Linda didn't move. Her chest rose and fell slowly, her eyes staring at the wall as if searching for sense in something senseless. Finally, she whispered, "Family isn't supposed to do this." Emily pulled back, her face pale. "She looked me in the eye, Mom. She didn't even flinch. Like it wasn't wrong. Like I was the fool." The words tasted like poison. Linda stroked her daughter's hair, her voice trembling. "We'll get through this. You're stronger than you think." But strength felt impossible. That night, Emily lay awake staring at the ceiling, the betrayal replaying in her head. Jessica's smirk, Michael's stammered excuses, her own helplessness. By morning, the secret was already spreading. Whispers traveled faster than truth. An aunt called Linda, her voice hushed but sharp. "Is it true what I heard about Jessica and Michael?" Another cousin texted Emily, "Are you okay? I can't believe she'd do that to you." Emily wanted to disappear. At work, she couldn't focus. Colleagues noticed the redness in her eyes, the silence where her laughter used to be. She brushed off their questions with a brittle smile. But inside, she was unraveling. That weekend, the Carter family gathered again. A smaller dinner, tense, suffocating. Emily sat stiffly at the table, her fork untouched. Jessica arrived late, dressed immaculately, as if nothing had happened. Michael wasn't there, but his absence screamed louder than any presence. The room felt split down the middle. Some relatives cast sympathetic glances at Emily. Others avoided her eyes altogether. And some, the cruelest ones, whispered that maybe Emily was overreacting. That maybe Jessica hadn't done anything wrong. Jessica slid into her chair, her smile perfectly polite. She didn't look at Emily once. But Emily looked at her. Every detail. The shimmer of her necklace, the painted nails, the calmness that bordered on arrogance. Her chest burned with a mix of rage and sorrow. Halfway through dinner, an uncle tried to lighten the mood. "Well, families fight. It's nothing new. I'm sure this will all pass." Emily's voice cut the room like glass. "Not this. This doesn't pass." Silence fell. Forks froze mid-air. No one dared breathe. Jessica finally looked at her, eyes gleaming, lips curving just slightly. Not a smile. Not quite. More like a challenge. Emily pushed back her chair, her heart thundering. She couldn't eat, couldn't sit in that suffocating room another second. She left, the door slamming behind her. Outside, the night was cold again. Her breath came fast, her hands shaking. Pain can break you, or it can build something inside you. Something colder, something sharper. In Emily's silence, in her sleepless nights, in the whispers that chased her, something new was taking shape. Her phone buzzed again. Michael. She stared at the screen, her finger hovering. Then she pressed decline. A text followed instantly. "Please, Emily. I made a mistake. Can we talk?" She deleted it without reading further. But deep inside, beneath the sorrow, another thought flickered for the first time. A thought she tried to push away, but it clung stubbornly, refusing to vanish. What if I don't forgive? What if I make them pay? The seed was there now, tiny but alive. And Emily, though she didn't know it yet, had already taken the first step down a road that would change everything. The seed of revenge. The days that followed blurred together. Morning coffee went cold on her desk. Nights stretched too long, her thoughts too loud. Emily Carter was alive, breathing, moving through the motions. But inside, something had died. At first, she tried to fight it. She went to work. She smiled politely at her co-workers. She told her mother she was fine. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw it. Jessica's smug calmness, Michael's guilty eyes. The betrayal didn't fade. Sharpened. One afternoon, while driving home from work, Emily pulled into a quiet overlook above the city. The skyline shimmered in the distance, glass towers glowing against the setting sun. She sat in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart heavy. And then the thought returned. What if I don't just move on? What if I don't forgive? Her breathing slowed. She whispered it out loud for the first time. What if I make them pay? The words hung in the air like a secret vow. At first, it frightened her. She'd always been the peacemaker, the quiet strength of the family. Revenge wasn't in her nature. At least, that's what she used to believe. But pain changes people. By the end of the week, Emily found herself watching Jessica differently. Not with sadness anymore, but with calculation. She paid attention to her cousin's routines. Which days she went shopping, which friends she met for lunch, the car she drove. The same with Michael, his work schedule, his new apartment, the numbers he posted online, the places he tagged himself in. She wasn't planning yet, not fully, but she was studying, observing. Her co-workers noticed the change. She was quieter, sharper. There was a new edge to her voice when she spoke. One friend, Megan, asked her over coffee, "Emily, are you sure you're okay? You're different." Emily forced a smile. "I'm fine." But her eyes betrayed her. They carried something colder now. That night, she stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. But beneath it, she saw something she'd never seen before. Strength. Not the gentle kind she once carried. Not patience. Not forgiveness. This was harder. Angrier. A strength that demanded action. Revenge doesn't start with a plan. It starts with a whisper. A flicker. A question you can't unask. And once it takes root, it spreads like fire. The whispers grew louder each day. At the next family dinner, Emily sat across from Jessica, forcing herself to stay calm. Jessica talked casually about her new shoes, her new clients, laughing as though nothing had happened. And then, she glanced at Emily. Just briefly. And in that glance, there was a spark of victory. That was the moment Emily knew. Forgiveness was dead. Jessica had declared war. And Emily was going to answer. Later that night, she pulled out a notebook. At first, she only scribbled words, anger spilling onto the page. Liar. Betrayer. Thief. But the scribbles became lists. Routines. Weak points. Possibilities. She stared at the page long after midnight. Her hands trembling but her resolve hardening. Michael and Jessica thought they had destroyed her. They hadn't destroyed her. They had created something new. Someone willing to do what Emily Carter never thought she could do. The planning begins. The notebook grew heavier each night. What began as angry words had now turned into neat columns, bullet points, strategies. At first, Emily hated herself for it. She'd slam the cover shut, telling herself she wasn't this kind of person, that she wouldn't actually go through with it. But by morning, she'd open it again. Add another detail, another possibility. She began small patterns, weaknesses. Jessica loved attention. She lived for her flawless reputation. Every Instagram post, every networking event, every story she told at family dinners. It was all designed to keep her image spotless. Michael was different. He thrived on control. He wanted to be seen as successful, dependable, trustworthy. If either of them lost those things, if their mask slipped even a little, Emily's pen pressed hard into the paper. That's where I start. She wasn't reckless. She knew she couldn't act in anger, not yet. One wrong move and she'd look bitter. Ready. People would side with Jessica. No, it had to be careful. Precise. The kind of revenge that wouldn't point back at her. Revenge isn't loud. Doesn't scream. The smartest revenge is a whisper. A nudge. A carefully placed crack that spreads until everything collapses. So she planned. She began following Jessica's social media more closely than ever before. Not just what she posted, but who commented, who liked, who believed her stories. She noticed inconsistencies. Jessica posted about her successful clients, but Emily knew some of them had already dropped her services. She bragged about wealth, but Emily remembered overhearing a hushed phone call once about overdue payments. Jessica wasn't as untouchable as she seemed. Michael too had cracks. Emily still knew his passwords. He had once trusted her that much. She didn't touch them yet, but she wrote them down, just in case. Each detail made her feel a little stronger, a little more in control. But planning wasn't without its weight. At night, lying awake in her mother's house, Emily's mind raced. What if someone finds out it's me? What if I go too far? What if I lose myself completely? Fear tangled with excitement. Every risk, every danger made her pulse quicken. One evening, she confided a fragment of her turmoil to Megan, her friend from work. "He betrayed me," Emily said quietly, staring into her coffee. "And she humiliated me. They don't even feel sorry. They walk around like nothing happened. Like I don't matter. How do you live with that?" Megan reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "You don't let them win. That's how." Emily's gaze flickered. Megan meant to comfort her, but those words sank deeper. Don't let them win. By the time Emily walked home that night, the decision was carved into her. No more hesitation. She wouldn't just survive this. She would answer it. The first step had to be small, subtle, something that would send a ripple without pointing back to her. Emily waited until Jessica posted about a high-profile client she was helping, a wealthy woman in the neighborhood. With careful timing, Emily left an anonymous message under the client's business page, hinting at Jessica's unprofessional behavior. Nothing obvious, just enough to plant doubt. Days later, Jessica complained at dinner that the client had suddenly gone cold, refusing to return her calls. Emily sat there, expression calm, heart pounding with a dangerous thrill. It had worked. Just one whisper. And already the cracks were spreading. Revenge doesn't happen all at once. It begins like rain, a single drop, then another, until the flood comes. And Emily was only just beginning. The whisper against Jessica's reputation had been only a test, a spark. But once Emily saw the effect, the thrill, she couldn't stop. Her notebook filled faster now. Not just observations but actions. Michael, Jessica, both of them had weaknesses. And Emily was going to exploit everyone. The first real strike came on a rainy Friday night. The kind of night when the streets glistened with water and people hurried home without noticing the shadows. Emily sat in her car outside Michael's apartment, watching from across the street. His blinds were half open, light spilling into the wet night. She saw him on the phone, pacing, distracted. Her heart raced. She wasn't here to confront him. Not yet. Tonight's move was quieter. She opened her laptop, tethered to her phone's hotspot. Michael's old passwords, the ones he had once trusted her with, worked like keys sliding into locks. Within minutes she was in. His emails, his bank statements. His carefully curated, spotless life laid bare on her screen. And there it was. The slip. A series of hidden credit card charges, not paid on time. His debt wasn't catastrophic yet, but it was growing. And if exposed, his reputation as a responsible, successful man would crack wide open. Emily copied everything, her fingers steady despite the storm in her chest. The next morning, an anonymous envelope slid under the office door of Michael's employer. Inside, screenshots of those very transactions. By Monday, whispers had begun. Michael's co-workers eyed him differently. One even joked too loudly about our golden boy not being so golden. Emily heard about it through the grapevine. Michael calling Jessica late at night, angry, panicked. And Emily smiled for the first time in weeks. Revenge is never clean. One strike always sends ripples, spreading further than you planned. The trick is knowing how far you're willing to let the water rise. But the ripples weren't just reaching Michael. Jessica began to feel the shift too. Her perfect balance, her clients, her family standing, her cousin's silence, was slipping. For the first time, Emily noticed fear behind Jessica's eyes at Sunday dinner. It was subtle, a twitch of the hand, a laugh a second too forced. But it was there, and Emily fed on it. Yet beneath the satisfaction, danger coiled tighter. Every move Emily made left a trail. Anonymous wasn't the same as invisible. If Michael or Jessica dug too deep, if anyone connected the pieces, her whole life could burn. She lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, the rain tapping at the window. Her chest ached with both exhilaration and dread. This wasn't just a plan anymore. This was a war. And wars have casualties. The first strike is the easiest. It's the ones that follow. The ones that push you deeper into the fire. That decide who you really are. Emily closed her notebook slowly, her pen trembling. She had struck once. She would strike again. But with every move, she knew, the danger was no longer just theirs. It was hers too. The notebook was almost full now. Pages and pages of rage, details, calculations. But tonight, Emily didn't need the notebook anymore. She had memorized every step. Her apartment was quiet except for the ticking of a clock on the wall. Outside, the city hummed with life. But Emily was locked in stillness, staring at her laptop screen. Jessica had been bragging online again, posting photos from a charity gala, dressing herself in borrowed glory, tagging influential people who didn't know how shallow her success really was. Michael, too, had been scrambling to cover his financial cracks. He had even borrowed money from Jessica, money she didn't have to spare. Their secrets were tangled now, their weaknesses feeding each other. Emily saw the web, and tonight she was going to snap it. She had gathered proof. Michael's debts, worse than he'd admitted. Jessica's falsified client portfolio. The lies she used to secure her biggest deal. The late-night call recordings Emily had captured. Michael begging Jessica to cover for him. Jessica hissing that, "Emily will never see us coming." Every lie. Every betrayal. Neatly packaged. Ready to detonate. The trap wasn't violence. It wasn't blood. It was exposure. Some betrayals end in silence. Others end in fire. Mine will end in light. The kind that blinds them when the truth burns through. Emily clicked send. An email. Just one email, carefully drafted, attached with evidence. To Jessica's biggest client, to Michael's employer, and to a journalist who loved scandals in high society. The web began to unravel. But Emily wasn't finished. She printed hard copies, sealing them in a plain envelope. Tomorrow, at the family gathering, her aunt's anniversary dinner, she would place it where everyone could see. Not quietly, not secretly. This time she wanted faces to break. The thought sent adrenaline through her veins. Hours later, Emily stood in front of the mirror, her reflection steady. She wore black, simple, controlled, a storm disguised as calm. "Tomorrow," she whispered. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, from certainty. Tomorrow everything would burn. The restaurant was glowing with warmth, strings of golden lights, polished wine glasses, and the buzz of family chatter. Emily's aunt was beaming, seated at the head of the long table, her anniversary cake waiting under silver covers. It was supposed to be a night of celebration. But for Emily it was the stage. She slipped into her seat, calm, almost detached. Across the table, Jessica sparkled in her red dress, laughter too loud, hands resting lightly on Michael's arm. Michael smirked, playing the perfect husband, as if the whispers at work, the debts, the lies hadn't touched him. They were so sure of themselves, so untouchable. Emily's pulse drummed as she touched the plain envelope in her bag. The dinner rolled on, toasts, glasses clinking, stories shared. Emily waited. Every detail slowed. The way Jessica adjusted her necklace, the way Michael leaned back with his practiced confidence. Then quietly Emily rose. She didn't make a speech. She didn't smile. She simply laid the envelope at the center of the table, sliding it across the white cloth until it rested by her aunt's hands. "What's this?" her aunt asked, curious. Jessica's laughter faltered. Michael frowned. Emily sat back down. Her voice was steady, almost too calm. "Why don't you open it?" The room hushed. Even the waiter, sensing tension, stepped back. Her aunt tore the envelope, pulling out the papers. Screenshots, emails, records. Gasps filled the air. Her uncle squinted. Is this true? Jessica's face drained of color. This is fake. Emily's making things up. Emily's gaze didn't waver. Really? Then explain the bank transfers, the falsified contracts, the phone calls. Michael leaned forward, anger flashing. Enough, Emily. Stop this. Stop what? Emily's voice cut like glass. Stop telling the truth. Stop exposing what you did to me. To all of us. Her aunt's hand trembled as she set the papers down. Whispers broke out around the table. Cousins murmuring, uncles shaking their heads. Jessica's mask slipped completely now. Her smile was gone, her voice sharp, frantic. You're just jealous. You always have been. This is pathetic. Emily's lips curled into something colder than a smile. Jealous? No, Jessica. I'm finished being jealous. I'm finished being silent. Michael slammed his fist against the table. You think this will ruin us? You think anyone's going to believe you over us? Emily leaned forward, her voice low, deliberate, every word a blade. They don't have to believe me. They just have to believe the evidence. The room fell into stunned silence. Jessica's hands shook as she tried to gather the papers, but her aunt pulled them back sharply. No. We need to know the truth. Michael's jaw tightened. Jessica's eyes darted wildly, searching for a way out. And Emily sat back in her chair, her heartbeat steady now. The first crack had split wide open. The room was watching. The whispers were spreading. And there was no going back. Exposure is like fire. Once it catches, it doesn't ask permission to spread. It burns where it will. And tonight, it was only just beginning. The papers lay scattered across the table like shards of broken glass. No one reached for food anymore. The air was heavy, tense enough to choke on. Jessica's hand gripped Michael's arm, her nails digging in. Her voice trembled, but her anger flared. Jessica, snapping. This is a setup. Emily's been waiting for years to drag me down. Emily, calm, cutting. I didn't need to drag you. You built your lies high enough. All I had to do was pull one thread. Michael leaned forward, his jaw tight. His voice low but sharp enough to slice. Michael, you're destroying this family. Emily leans in closer, unflinching. No. You destroyed it the moment you betrayed me. The room stilled. Her words hung there, heavier than the storm outside. A cousin coughed nervously, another looked away. But no one interrupted. Jessica, defensive, almost pleading. We didn't mean for it to happen like this. Michael and I. Emily, interrupting, voice cracking but firm. Stop. Don't you dare soften it. You lied. You laughed behind my back. You made me feel like I was nothing. And for what? For this? She gestures to the papers. To end up exposed in front of everyone you ever wanted to impress. Michael slammed his fist again, this time louder. Enough, Emily. You think you've won. You think ruining us makes you better. Emily's eyes burned, her chest heaving. Better? No, Michael. Not better. Just free. Jessica's face twisted, anger replacing fear. You think they'll still respect you after this? You look like a bitter child lashing out. Emily leaned back, her laugh hollow, sharp. Funny. That's exactly what people will say about you tomorrow, when the story runs in the papers. The color drained from Jessica's face. Michael froze. Michael, hissing, almost whispering, what did you do? Emily met his eyes. Cold. Unforgiving. Emily. I told the truth. To everyone. The silence that followed was deafening. Chairs creaked. Someone's fork clinked against the plate, untouched. Jessica's mask shattered. Tears welled, anger cracked. Her voice broke into desperation. Jessica. Emily, please. Don't do this. You don't know what it will cost me. Emily's reply was soft, almost tender, but merciless. Emily. Neither did I, Jessica. Neither did I. The weight of betrayal, of years of silence, of buried rage. It all pulsed through her voice. Her aunt finally whispered, I can't believe this. But her words drowned in the storm raging between the three of them. Confrontation isn't about answers. It's about mirrors. And when you hold one up, some people can't stand to see what they've become. The restaurant felt colder now. The golden lights hadn't dimmed, but something in the room had. Guests shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between Jessica, Michael, and Emily. No one dared speak above a whisper. Jessica's hands trembled as she shoved the papers back toward Emily, her voice cracking. Take it back. You don't know what you've done. This could ruin everything. Emily didn't flinch. Her voice was steady, but her words were knives. It's already ruined, Jessica. You just didn't notice the cracks until they caved in. Michael leaned across the table, lowering his voice to a growl. You think you're safe in this? If this goes public, I lose my job, my career. I'll make sure you pay for that, Emily. Her reply was calm, cutting. You already made me pay. Every night I cried, every time I doubted myself, every lie you told. Those were the payments. Tonight, I'm collecting what's owed. Jessica shot up from her chair, tears streaking her makeup. You planned this, you sick, jealous witch. You waited until tonight to humiliate us. Emily stood too, facing her, their eyes locked like dueling flames. I didn't wait. I survived. And now I'm finished surviving. The room held its breath. The tension was unbearable. Michael finally snapped, his mask torn away. He grabbed the papers, tearing them in half, shoving the shreds onto the table. There. No one needs to see this garbage again. Emily's lips curled into a bitter half-smile. Paper tears. But not servers. Not inboxes. Not headlines. Jessica's knees buckled. Her voice was a whisper now, desperate. You sent it already. Emily leaned closer, so close Jessica could feel her breath. By morning, everyone you've ever tried to impress will know who you really are. Jessica gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Michael froze, his fury draining into panic. Around the table, silence stretched long and sharp. The family had no words. Confrontation was over. This was collapse. Revenge doesn't explode all at once. It breaks in slow motion, like glass shattering across a floor. Each crack louder than the last, until there's nothing left to stand on. Jessica slumped into her chair, mascara streaked, her hands covering her face. Michael sat stiff, jaw locked, his career flashing before his eyes. And Emily stood taller, steadier, her breathing slow. For the first time in years, the weight on her chest was gone. But the silence that followed was not peace. It was aftermath. No one touched their food anymore. Plates sat cold, candles flickered, and the restaurant's soft jazz felt almost mocking against the tension. Jessica sat motionless, her mascara smudged into dark stains. Her hands clutched her glass of water, but she couldn't lift it. Her body shook with every shallow breath. Michael's face was stone. He stared straight ahead, not at Emily, not at Jessica, not at anyone. His jaw twitched, his fists clenched under the table. He looked like a man cornered, dangerous but powerless. Across from them, Emily stood still. Her hands rested on the back of her chair, her eyes sweeping over the table. She didn't need to say more. She had already said enough. Finally, her aunt broke the silence. Her voice was quiet, almost trembling. Emily, is it true? Everything. Emily nodded once. It is. A murmur ran through the table. Some gasped. Others simply looked down, ashamed that they hadn't seen it before. Jessica finally spoke, her voice broken, fragile. You've destroyed me. Do you understand that? You've destroyed my life. Emily's reply was soft, almost whisper-like, but it carried more weight than Jessica's scream ever could. No, Jessica. You destroyed mine first. I just returned the truth to you. Her words cut through the air, sharp and final. Michael's chair scraped as he stood, grabbing his coat with jerky movements. He didn't look at Jessica, didn't look at Emily. He just muttered, "This isn't over. before storming out of the restaurant. Jessica stayed frozen, her shoulders crumpled in defeat. For the first time in years, her perfect mask was gone, and what remained was raw, pitiful. Emily took one last look at her. There was no gloating in her eyes, no victory smile. Only a strange calm, like the quiet after a long storm. She turned to her family, her voice steady. "You all deserve to know. What you do with it now, that's up to you." And with that, Emily pushed her chair back and walked out. The night air hit her skin, cool and clean. She inhaled deeply, her chest rising with freedom. For the first time in years, she wasn't carrying their secrets anymore. Revenge doesn't give back what was stolen, doesn't erase the pain, but sometimes it clears the air enough for you to finally breathe again. Emily walked into the night, her steps slow but certain, leaving the wreckage behind her. The storm was over, and silence had never felt so powerful. The night after the dinner, Emily found herself walking streets she had known for years but never really noticed. Street lamps glowed pale, cars passed in distant hums, and the city seemed to breathe slower than it had inside that restaurant. Her phone buzzed with notifications, texts from cousins, a missed call from her aunt, even a voicemail from a number she didn't recognize. She didn't listen. Not yet. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of her silence. She let it settle around her like a blanket. When she reached her apartment, she set her keys on the counter and stared at the small, cluttered living room. The couch with worn fabric, the plant by the window half wilted, the bookshelf stacked unevenly. It was imperfect, but it was hers. And that mattered more tonight than it ever had before. She poured herself a glass of water and sat by the window, watching the glow of the city. For the first time in so long, she didn't feel like she was hiding. Yet peace didn't come easily. Her chest still carried a strange heaviness. She had spoken the truth, revealed everything, shattered Jessica's lies and Michael's mask. But the ache inside her wasn't gone. It wasn't triumph she felt. It was something else. Something emptier. Revenge is strange. Tastes sharp at first like victory. But then, it lingers like smoke, and you wonder if the fire you lit burned too much or not enough. The next morning, the fallout began. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Headlines spread faster than she could scroll. Articles on local news sites with titles like, "Corporate Manager Michael Reed accused of workplace affair." "Family's Charity exposed for financial mismanagement." Pictures of Jessica and Michael appeared everywhere, often grainy shots taken from their social media profiles. Comment sections exploded with speculation, criticism, judgment. Emily didn't smile. She didn't feel glee. She just stared, scrolling until her eyes blurred, until she finally dropped the phone face down and let it buzz without her. Because this wasn't about strangers on the internet. This was about her family, her blood. By afternoon, her mother called. Emily hesitated, then picked up. "Emily." Her mother's voice was soft, shaky. "Is it true? What you told us last night? What the news is saying?" Emily closed her eyes, leaned back into the couch. "Yes, Mom. It's true." There was silence. Long one. And then her mother sighed. A sound so heavy it felt like it could crack through the phone. "I wish it wasn't. But I suppose it had to come out. You did what you thought was right." Emily didn't answer. She couldn't. Days passed. Michael resigned from his firm. Jessica shut down her charity board. Their faces faded from the news cycle after a week, replaced by new scandals, new names. But inside the family, the storm raged on. Some relatives sided with Emily. They called her brave, honest, the only one strong enough to expose the truth. Others avoided her calls. Some even whispered she had gone too far, that she had humiliated them all by airing dirty laundry in public. At family gatherings, her name floated like a ghost, sometimes praised, sometimes cursed, rarely forgotten. And Emily, she carried it all, every word, every look, every silence, because revenge doesn't end when you walk away. It lingers, stains. One evening, a week later, Emily found herself back at the restaurant. Not inside. Just standing outside the window, staring at the golden light spilling onto the sidewalk. Inside, strangers laughed, clinked glasses, lived their ordinary nights. She thought about that dinner. About Jessica's face, streaked with tears. About Michael's voice, low and threatening. About the silence that followed her final words. And for a moment she wondered, had she become like them? A person defined by betrayal, by lies, by destruction. Her chest tightened. She leaned against the wall, pressing her palms flat. Some revenge satisfies, others leave scars. And sometimes it's hard to tell which one you've given yourself. But healing is stubborn. It sneaks in through cracks you don't expect. Weeks later, Emily met with her cousin Rachel, one of the few who had stood by her. They sat in a coffee shop, quiet jazz in the background, steam rising from mugs. "You don't look happy," Rachel said softly, stirring her drink. Emily smiled faintly. "I'm not sure happiness was ever the point." "Then what was?" Emily thought for a long time. Her fingers traced the rim of her cup. "To breathe," she finally said. "To stop carrying the weight of their lies. To exist without pretending." Rachel reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "Then you did the right thing. Even if it hurts." Emily looked at her cousin, eyes stinging, and whispered, "But will it always hurt?" Rachel didn't answer. She didn't need to. Months later, Emily walked through Central Park on a cool spring morning. Joggers passed. Children laughed near the playground, and the trees rustled with new leaves. She carried a book, though she didn't open it. She just walked. She thought about Michael and Jessica. Where were they now? Had they rebuilt? Had they learned anything? Or were they just angry, plotting, waiting for a chance to strike back? She didn't know. She might never know. But for once, the thought didn't weigh her down. Because revenge isn't a loop unless you let it be. She stopped near the lake, watching sunlight ripple on the water. And for the first time she allowed herself to cry. Not sharp, angry tears, but slow ones, soft ones. Tears for what was lost, for what could never be again. Her reflection in the water blurred, then cleared as she wiped her eyes. Peace doesn't come in triumph. Comes in acceptance. In realizing you can't undo what was broken. You can only decide not to live in the ruins forever. Emily turned away from the water and kept walking. Her story wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about survival, about truth, about starting again even if scars remained. And so the question remained, did she feel peace? Or emptiness? The truth was simple, both. She had peace in her freedom, but emptiness in the space left behind. And maybe that was what revenge always gave in the end. Not victories, not answers. Just space. Space to breathe. Space to hurt. Space to heal. Emily didn't know what came next. But she knew this much. Whatever path she took, it would be hers. Not defined by Michael. Not haunted by Jessica. Hers. And that was enough. Because sometimes revenge doesn't close the book. Just gives you a pen. And the courage to start writing again. Revenge doesn't always give answers. But it always changes the story. So let me ask you, if someone shattered your trust, would you stay silent? Or write your own ending? Follow for more stories that cut this deep. Share this with someone who believes in truth over lies. And remember, your voice matters. Always.